Okay, good afternoon. So today we're going to be talking about life. As usual, we always talk about life. But of course, based on and how we're going to learn it from this week's Torah reading, as we're getting closer to the end of the book of Numbers, the Jewish people about to enter into the land of Israel. There's a very famous, well-known saying, a line as follows: life is what happens to us at the time while we make other plans. The reality is that the situations in life give us this challenge, the struggle to be able to define life that we were aspiring to have and the life that God has given us. And we are always in this struggle of, can it be different? Should it be different? If it only was different, if only this, if only that, and if only the other. When do we finally have peace and serenity in life? Is when we're able to overcome and get over that hurdle and recognize and release the tension that we have in trying to think that we control everything in life, and recognize that everything that happens is because it's divinely ordained, recognizing and realizing that everything that happens in life and where we are to the smallest details is because God knows and understands and appreciates of where we can have, and recognizing and realizing that I don't control everything and giving myself over to a greater thing, recognizing that life is more than I understand, helps us have more serenity in our life. And to be able to understand this and to get a better appreciation about what the challenges of life and how we go about understanding life is by looking at a very important question that starts off with this week's Torah reading. And as we'll soon see, that this week's Torah reading talks about the Jewish people dividing the land of Israel. And the dividing the land of Israel came in a threefold way, as we'll soon elaborate. But one of the ways that the way of Israel was divided was, as the Torah tells us, al pi hagoyrel, according to lottery. Why was there a need of a lottery to decide of which parcel of land goes to which tribe? If already the Urim V'Tumim, which was divinely ordained by the Urim V'Tumim, was the breastplate of the high priest that gave the divine prophecy of what and who should get it, why was there a need then for a lottery? In general, why do you do a lottery? When you can't make up a decision, where all things being equal, therefore you make a lottery, who should be able to get the thing, being that everybody's on the same par. But if you have a king, or you have a mandate, or you have a higher understanding and appreciation of why something is needed, then there's no need for a lottery. We find that this is not the only place that a lottery is used. In the Holy Temple, on the holiest day of the year of Yom Kippur, the high priest brought two goats. One went on the altar that was brought as a sacrifice, and another was sent to a mountain that an old man threw down and was killed that way. Why was a lottery needed? Why just decide, this go to here, this goat goes there? Another instance that we learn about a lottery is Purim. In fact, the word Purim means lottery. That Haman made a decision of how he's going to kill the Jewish people based on a lottery of what month it was going to come out, and therefore he found out that this month was good because Moses died in that month, and he already made these equations and calculations of how it should be. Why is there a need for a lottery? What does a lottery, according to Jewish law, is one allowed to follow a lottery? Can somebody just flip a coin and say, okay, whatever side the coin falls on, that's the way I'm going to follow my life, and that's the decisions I'm going to make? Is one allowed to use this type of method to be able to decide his future and his fate? Is this something that the non-Jews do? And therefore, as we know, we're not supposed to follow the ways of the non-Jews. And is this a foolish way of one determining what their destiny should be? And as we're going to explain, and as we're going to see as we go through the class, that the definition of a lottery teaches us something greater. That life is not about our definitions or our understanding. That there's a certain idea, not only idea, but the way our life was set is something that we don't always understand. Not only we don't always understand, but when we submit that we're not going to understand everything, and we recognize that all is a lottery, that God has chosen us to do a certain task and to be able to live through a certain life and go through a certain challenge, we automatically are then welcome it and are able to overcome it and have a deeper serenity and peace in that. And allowing ourselves to give ourselves over, submit ourselves to the captain of the ship, letting God direct our ways, helps us in every single facet of our life. And at the end of the day, we're going to see that the choice of the human being is not what will be, but how am I going to make it happen? How am I going to react? Or how am I going to live the life that God has given me? So instead of being stubborn and putting your feet in the ground and saying, no, I protest and I want life to be differently, but welcoming what God gives us, recognizing that God is giving us the strength, the intellect, and the impetus to be able to overcome those challenges, and submitting ourselves to the captain of the boat gives us a safer ride, a smoother ride without turbulence. And let's go now look at it from the angles of this week's Torah reading and see it and appreciate it a little deeper. So as we mentioned, we're coming to the close to the end of the book of Numbers. The end of the book of Numbers means that the Jewish people are right at the border of the land of Israel. Last week we spoke about the different wars that the Jewish people had to wage against the Moabites, Sichon, the Og, the non-Jewish prophet who tried to curse the Jewish people. This was right before the entrance of the Jewish people going into the land of Israel. So we're talking about in the last year of the Jewish people about to get into the land of Israel. And Moshe, so to speak, closing his affairs, getting everything in order before he knows that his time comes to pass. As the book of Deuteronomy is already at the month before Moses is passing, and that's Moses' last will and testament to the Jewish people. So we're looking at now 40 years cumulatively. The Jewish people are now at the border and about to go into the land of Israel, and it's time to talk, as they say in Hebrew, tachlis. Bottom line, business. What's going to happen? You have over here over 3 million people are about to enter the land of Israel. There's great swaths of land of Israel that are different types of territories, bigger, small. You have different tribes, as we count this week in the Torah reading, the amount of people that belong to each tribe. You have the tribe of Judah that was 72,000 people, while you have the tribe of Manasseh who may have been 32,000 people. And we're looking at different areas of the land of Israel, who's going to get what. And over here, the Torah tells us, and Moshe tells the Jewish people, what God tells them of how they're going to split the land, and how each tribe is going to get their parcel of land in the land of Israel, and Yoshua is going to be the one responsible of allocating those areas to the Jewish people. Just fast forward a little bit for later, when the Jewish people actually come into the land of Israel. It takes about 7 years of conquering the land from the nations of the world that were there at the time, and then another 7 years until everybody finally got settled in their land, in their respective lands. And the Torah tells us that there are 2 steps of what it would take and how the process went in deciding who would get which land and how the land was allocated. Number 1 process that the Torah enumerates in Hebrew is L'rav tarbe nachalosei v'lama'at mami taminat nachalosei. You had a larger tribe, they got a larger swath of land. A smaller tribe got a smaller property of land. It made sense only that if you have a larger tribe, you should be able to have a larger parcel of land. Because no 2 tribes were the same. There were 12 different tribes. Each one had a different amount of people, and therefore each tribe would get another parcel of land accordingly to what was needed for the amount of people in their tribe. Besides that, there's also quality of land. I can give somebody a large parcel of land, but if it's in the desert, then they have no way of prospering through it. So every single tribe had to have in it a certain ability in their land to be able to have some type of profit that they can earn from it agriculturally and so on. So therefore there had to be calculations in how it was made, what tribe would get what parcel, what was the quality of a land, if they got a seafront property, or if they got an oil-based property, whatever was in the land, everything had to be taken into calculation, by the quality of the land and by the quantity of the people of who were occupying the land. After they made this logical split, meaning of what each land would get, they then used 2 spiritual ways to be able to figure out if what they did was correct. Number 1 was the Urim V'Tumim. As we mentioned, the Urim V'Tumim was carried on the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. This was only used at the time of the tabernacle and in the first temple era. In between the breastplate of the high priest, it was a parchment with God's divine name in it, and the Jewish people had the opportunity that they would ask, the prophet or the Kohen Gadol would ask of God a message that they would know in real time if what they're doing is correct. It was generally used if they should go out to war, if they should attack the enemies, and it would light up on the Urim V'Tumim, and it would announce on the Choshen, on the breastplate, what should be the response. In this case, Elazar, the high priest, responded by what was given on the Urim V'Tumim, read the code that was given, and every swath of property that was then given to every tribe, that parcel of land that was decided that each tribe should get, the Urim V'Tumim ascertained that that was correct, that they should get that parcel of land. Yehuda this area, Binyamin that area, whatever it may be. Besides that, there was another level, another layer of ascertaining that they did the correct thing, which that was called a lottery. A miracle would happen, and that's why, if you look in the words of this week's Torah reading, it says, Al pi hagoyrel, by the mouth of the lottery, that basically what they did was every leader of the tribe would get up there. In one bag, there was the parcel of land. The other bag was the leader of the tribe would take out his hand, and he would put it together and say, Ruvain matches to this parcel of land. Shimon matches to this parcel of land. But it wasn't just that the person put his hand in the bag and took out the parchment that said the parcel of land, but in fact, it would announce by divine presence and say, this is the parcel of land that belongs to the tribe of Reuven. Like this, there was no conflict. Everybody was in agreement. A, the way they did it, and B, that it was by divine inspiration as well. And over here, the question, and the obvious question is, why the need for a lottery? If I'm doing it by proper calculations, then every single tribe should get whatever their parcel of land is, based on the quantity and the quality of the people and the land. Why do I need a lottery? If I want that it should be spiritually, divinely agreeable and ascertained by, I already had the Urim V'Tumim, I already had the divine speech that came from the holy breastplate of the Kohen Gadol that announced and said that it should be the right thing. Why was there a need for a third proof, which was a lottery? Even more so, as we mentioned, the concept of a lottery is beyond rationale. It seemingly looks that these two ideas, splitting it according to rationale, and then asking a lottery is counterintuitive. It's the opposite of one another. A lottery is everything but logic. A lottery means I spin the wheel, I take out the number, and that person wins. There's no rhyme or reason why that person should win the lottery. There's no rhyme or reason why a person should win a raffle, whatever it may be. It's simply beyond nature, beyond logic. And over here, the Torah tells us that when splitting the land, you have to do two things. Number one, you're going to work in a way of logic. That means you're going to look by why this person has a certain parcel of land. The amount of people that they have should fit to the parcel and the type of land. And then how are you going to ascertain it? By a way beyond logic. How does that work out? How does that make sense? They're antithetical to one another. If I'm doing it by logic, so therefore, fine, that makes sense. And if I'm doing it by lottery, do it that way. But why is one helping the other? How is one helping the other? We see that this is not the first time that a lottery was used in the Torah. In fact, a few Torah readings earlier, we find another thing that Moshe used the lottery for, to identify and to clarify a doubt. If you recall in the Torah reading of Bahaloscha, the third Torah reading in the book of Numbers, the Jewish people were complaining about the menu. They wanted meat and fish on the menu. And they say, we remember the fish that we had in Egypt. And Moses says, oh no, not again. I can't deal with these people. God, take me. I don't want to deal with these complaints. They want to learn Torah. They have complaints about the spiritual things. Fine, I'll deal with it. But what the menu, how they want to taste the bread, I can't deal with this. I'm not here to give them deli sandwiches. As the words that Moses says, am I the mother that gave birth to them that I have to worry about what they can eat for dinner? Why me? So what does God say? You're going to take now from your prophecy, you can have 70 helpers, 70 different prophets. How are they going to decide who the 70 prophets were? So every tribe was going to give 6 individuals from their tribe. That would make 70. And thereby you would have every tribe would have a representative of prophets from their tribe. But if you know your math, what is 12 times 6? I'll help you out. It's 72. That means there's 2 extra. That means 2 tribes are only going to get 5 people representatives, not 6. How is Moshe going to decide which tribe should only have 5, not 6? That's not fair. So what does Moshe do? He does a lottery. He does a lottery and he says whichever tribe is going to pick out the numbers, every individual will pick out a number. The last 2 people that don't get picked out, they're the 2 that get left out. Where do we see this? Because we see the 2 individuals who were talking in prophecy, Eldad and Medad. The Torah uses the terminology Vehema Baksuvim, and they were written in. What does it mean they were written in? Where were they written in? And the Torah is telling us they were the people that were in the lottery. They won. They were the people that were part of the ones that won in the lottery, and that's why they were saying prophecy. So what we see over here is Moshe didn't know which tribe should be only 5. He used the lottery to be able to tell him which one. But it makes sense. He didn't want to be the one to pick. God didn't tell him which tribe should only have 5. But in our case, how does it make sense to use a lottery? In our case, God tells him, use the majority, go by population, go by quality of land, and that's what you're going to decide. Not only that, if he's ascertaining by the words of the Urim V'Tumim, by the divine presence of God and the breastplate of the Holy Kohen Gadol, why do you still need a lottery? What's the purpose of this lottery? Seemingly it was superfluous. And not only superfluous, it wasn't even needed, and it was against the logic of why having a lottery all the way to begin with. So there are different commentaries that disagree with Rashi's commentary that the lottery also was just there to ascertain what they already knew about dividing the land. Nachmanides actually says that everything went according to the lottery. It didn't make a difference how large the tribe was, what kind of quality of land it was, if one was better or worse. He says the only thing that they went according to the tribe and how they went according to the land was once the lottery was already picked. That means the lottery said where Yehuda would be, where Binyamin would be, where Shimon would be. Then they would also, once they got that area of land individually within the tribe, that they also fixed how much each person should get within the family of the tribe. That means you had larger families, smaller families, but who picked what land? That was completely a lottery. So over here, the lottery, according to Nachmanides, he says the lottery actually determined where each tribe got their parcel of land. In contrast to Rashi, where Rashi says the lottery just ascertained what land they got, over here he says the lottery actually determined which land they got. The Abarbanel, another commentator on the Torah, gives a third opinion, someplace in the middle, and he says, yes, they did. There were areas and there was actual parcels. The lottery told you the area, but the actual parcel was determined by each family. And therefore, the actual area, which had a very, that means the area was given to each one. That means each area was given to each tribe, predetermined by the lottery. How much of that area was then determined by the size of the tribe. So if I say the north of Israel should be Judea, so that north of Judea, how much of the north went to Judea, that was already calculations. But the lottery determined where it should be. Regardless, whether it's according to the Nachmanides, the Abarbanel, the actual need of the lottery decided where it would go and what the land and where the area that tribe would be. The question still remains, why did they need the lottery? If I already had the Urim V'Tumim, if I already had the divine presence telling it to me by the Kohen Gadol, even according to Nachmanides and the Abarbanel, what do I need the lottery for? I already had the king announced, you're getting that swath of land, meaning the divine presence, the divine intuition already told the Jewish people of where it's going to be. You don't like it? Tough luck. What's the lottery going to help you? The same way Korach didn't like that Moshe was the leader, and because of that he was swallowed into the ground. So too, if a Jewish tribe didn't like the land that they were given, the Urim V'Tumim announced it. That's what you got. You don't like it? Tough luck. What's the lottery going to help you? On the contrary, the lottery is also beyond intellect. If they don't like what the Urim V'Tumim said, how is they're going to like what the lottery said? Now, of course, they all matched up, but what was the need for it? The Medrash explained simply that the very fact that there was a lottery, that helped that there should be less arguments and differences of opinion about it. That means the more you had proof that each one of these parcels of land belonged to each tribe, the less likely it was that somebody could argue about it. So over here you had number one, you who used your logic, large tribes, small tribes, certain parcels of land, better quality. Number two, you had the Urim V'Tumim. And number three, the very fact that the Torah uses the terminology, only with the Gorel, only with the lottery, meaning that this is the final straw that everybody would come to agree upon, that there would be no arguments about it. Especially the way Rashi explains it, that there was the announcement with the lottery, that the moment the person picked it out of the bag, as we mentioned before, there was a divine voice that came out and said, this piece of land belongs to this tribe, this would make everybody happy and there would be no arguments about it. But the question that we still stay with is, what's the concept and what does it mean, a lottery? And this gives us an opportunity to look at, what does a lottery mean according to Jewish law? Can one depend on the lottery? Does the choice of the lottery have influence in our life? And how does this help us when we look at different places in Jewish history that lottery was used? So let's look at the different places where lottery is used in Jewish law and in Jewish history. We mentioned before, there was on Yom Kippur, starting with Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, there were two goats that were brought before the Kohen Gadol, and he had two blocks. On one block it said Lashem, on the other block it said La'azazel, that would go to the mountain of Azazel, and he would take his hands and put it down on the two goats. The one that said Lashem was brought as a sacrifice, and the second one on the left-hand side would go to the mountain Azazel and be thrown down the mountain by a person who was prepared from before Yom Kippur, would walk the mile and a half, and that's how the Jewish people would know that they were forgiven. That's one lottery that we find in the Torah. Another lottery that we mentioned earlier, that we find in the prophets, is the lottery of Purim. In fact, just a little tidbit, the Zohar says, Purim and Yom HaKippurim, very similar. Yom HaKippurim, the day which is like Purim, which is Yom Kippur, and Purim, which is seemingly even higher than Yom Kippur. Both of them, Purim means lotteries, lots. Because it's for the lot, Al Shem HaPur, as we say in the Megillah, because of the lot that Haman cast to see what day he wanted to destroy the Jews. Kippurim, on Yom Kippur, we also have lots, which that is the lot of the two goats. Interestingly enough, so you see the comparison that the both of them have lotteries done on the same day. And over there as well, Haman was looking for a method to choose what day he would try to, God forbid, destroy the Jewish people. He cast a lot, and that it came out from heaven that he should pick the month of Adar. He thought it was the greatest month because Moses died. Little did he know that it was the same month that Moses was born, and how this was going to be the greatest festival for the Jewish people. What's the connection between Purim and Yom Kippur that both have lotteries? What's so unique about this concept of lotteries, casting lots on the holiest day of the year, the greatest festival, the Day of Atonement? What does this happen? So what is a lottery in Jewish law? Does a lottery affect Jewish law? Is one allowed to use the flip of a coin to be able to determine what they should do? Can someone decide his fate based on a lotto? Can one use different types of methods to be able to find out what to do and how to do it based on by happenstance and chances that he sees and things that happen? Is one allowed to make lotteries to be able to determine who should be awarded certain things? Let's say in the synagogue, you want to say this guy should get this aliyah, can I make a raffle to decide who should get which thing? When there's many people that have the same obligation. So there are different halachic authorities talking about in different one of these situations. And most halachic authorities say that in a case where everybody has equal opportunity, that means there's no advantage from one person over the next, you're allowed to use a raffle to be able to figure out who should be the right winner. There was a instance once in Israel that there were two representatives that were going for the position of chief rabbi of a certain city. And the votes came out equal for both constituents. And the question was, can they make a raffle to decide which one should win? Because since they both won, they both got the same amount of votes. At the time, they asked Rabbi Vadia Yosef, was a very great Sephardic chief rabbi at the time, and he ruled that they were not allowed to make a raffle because at the end of the day, each constituent brings a different attitude or a different type of quality to the matter, so they're not equal stand, and they have to redo the election, and that's the only way you can determine who it is. But in a case, for example, where you're in a synagogue, everybody's equal concerning getting this aliyah, you can make a raffle, who should get first, who should get second, who should get third, if everybody is unequal and there is no qualification of one opportunity more than the other. And this was actually done in the Holy Temple. The Tractate of Yuma tells us that in the Holy Temple there was every single morning, they would make a raffle for different jobs that were in the Holy Temple. For example, one of the jobs were cleaning off the ash from the night before as the fire was burning all night. And it used to be first come, first serve. Whichever Kohen ran up first was able to take it off. But later on, when more Kohanim wanted to do the job, it became a little pushy, and one guy fell off the ramp. So therefore, they decided to make a raffle. And the way they would make a raffle is they would all stand in a circle. They would guess a number, count the fingers. Whoever gets the right number, whoever was that number, that's who got the one to be able to bring to do the job. So we see that raffles and lotteries were done in the time of the Holy Temple. There's an interesting story. There was a Knesset member many years ago. His name was Avram Ravitz. In fact, I think his daughter-in-law was that woman that wouldn't shake the Pope's hand when she went with the President of Israel. So this fellow Avram Ravitz was had a kidney infection, and he needed a new kidney. He didn't want to take from anybody but his family, but he didn't want to take from his daughters because he was worried it might affect their pregnancy. So he only wanted to take from his sons. And his sons, they all wanted to give their kidney. They all felt that they should be the one to give their kidney to their father. The oldest said, I'm the oldest, I should have first priority, I'm right. The second said, well, I'm this. And each one had another argument why they should be the one to give their kidney to their father. So they went to the rabbi. The rabbi said, make a raffle, because they all have equal rights. So they made a raffle, and the oldest one was the one that actually was the one to give his kidney to his father. But you see, the concept is that they were equal, and because of that, they made a lottery, and they made a raffle, who should be the one. But we see from here, still, this is only talking about when everybody is equal, everybody has on the same playing level, and therefore we say, according to Jewish law, you're allowed to make a raffle to decide what should be. What about, can we rely on a raffle to be able to split up certain type of agencies or certain type of properties? Can that be used by a raffle as well? And the question is, can we decide by the toss of a coin or by whatever it may be, not only this, or any aspect in life, or different things that happen in life? Should I change houses? Should I marry this person? Should I move to a different location? Can I use different methods of seemingly predicting future by the toss of a coin or by other predictive measures to be able to decide what should be done? And the question that we talk about is, what is a raffle? Is a raffle a revelation from God, a lottery, a revelation from God telling me this is the right thing you should be doing? Or is it just by chance? It so happened to be flipped on the heads or tails, and that's why you're making that decision based on no real spiritual matter. It's just by chance. It so happened to be. It works out. It doesn't work out. Whatever it may be. Even worse, is this a method of non-Jews? In the Torah, in the language of halacha, there's something called Darkei HaAmori, the ways of the Amorites. There are certain things that are prohibited in the Torah. The Torah tells us, you shouldn't go in the ways of the non-Jews. You shouldn't dress like them. You shouldn't act like them. You shouldn't, because it's a term of idolatry. You shouldn't take haircuts like them. There's different things that we find in the Torah. For example, one of the things that are mentioned, tattoos. Why is it against Jewish law? Is because that was the ways of the Amorites. That was the ways of the non-Jews. One of the reasons why the Torah says, the Torah does name it as one of the prohibition, but part of the prohibition, and this is the actual question about tattoo, there's two prohibitions of it. Is it a prohibition because it's actually defacing your body and you have to give your body back the way you got it? Or is it also because this is the ways of the Amorites? So there's two angles of it, but I'm just giving it as an example now to be able to talk about tattoos now, that the restrictions, that there is a prohibition of doing things because the non-Jews do it. And the question is, following such a type of attitude, going by luck, going by chance, type of psychic, if you want to call it, the type of ideas, is this an Amorite behavior? So on one hand, and the question is such an action valid according to Jewish law? Or is it something which is totally denigrated and something which is completely against Jewish law? Not only is it something which is by chance, but it's even against Jewish law because it's like the non-Jews do. So if you look in history, we do find that the use of lottery, raffles, was used and employed. One example is Eliezer. In biblical times, Eliezer was told by Abraham to go find a match for Isaac. He comes to the well and he makes a deal with God. Is a girl going to come and offer me water at my camel's water? Then I know she's the right one. If not, then I know she's not the right one. So he was basically saying a lot, making a lottery. Does she offer me water? Then she's the right one. She doesn't offer me water. She's not the right one. Is that allowed? We see divine providence happened, that he doesn't even finish his statement. Rivka comes along, offers him water, and says, this is the right one, and that's how he knows to choose the girl for his master's son. Other examples we find going later on in the prophets. After Joshua conquered the land of Jericho, all of a sudden people started dying. A big plague happened. Joshua realized that there was somebody here that went against the will of God and was taking from the booty of the land of Jericho. But how was Joshua to find out? So he made a lottery, made a raffle, put everybody's name in it. And with it came out a name by the fellow of Ochen ben Carmi, who was the one that took from the booty. So we see, he used the lottery to find out who it was. Go a little bit further in history, a story which is all famous to us, Jonah and the whale. Jonah's on the boat, a big storm is happening at sea. What do the people do? They throw a lottery, they see, Jonah's the one. The way the storm is because of him. What do? They throw him off board because since the storm is because of him. So we see again in those cases, over here, practically speaking, lottery, raffles were used to determine situations of who and what's going on over here. So what's going on over here? Can we use it or can't we use it? The Talmud tells us about Talmudic scholars. Rav, for example, would come to how would he know if he was ready to travel or if he should travel? If he came to the shore and the ferry was there waiting for him, he knew it's time for him to travel. If he had to wait for the ferry, then he knew that it's not time for him to travel. Shmuel would open up a book, a scroll. And if he would look in the scroll and open up to a place which he told him what he should do, he would follow what it said in the scroll. Rabbi Yochanan, he would go over to a child, ask him what he learned in school today, and he would tell him a verse, and based on the verse that the child told him, he knew what he was supposed to do. And we even see actually Haman did the same. We see one of the Roman emperors, when it came to destroying the temple, they also employed this type of tactic of asking a child what he's learned, and with the child saying the verse, that was a form of prophecy that they were able to know what to do. Still in all, even though we see these type of tactics employed, Maimonides is completely opposed to using such type of methods. Maimonides says, this is ways of the Amorites, this is the non-Jewish way of using different predictive matters to be able to find out what you should and shouldn't do, and one is not allowed to do it. And not like Eliezer, even though you're going to tell me Eliezer in the Torah used it, he used a predictive measure to see if Rebecca would give him water or not. We are not supposed to be like Eliezer. Some of the commentaries on Maimonides explain because Eliezer wasn't Jewish. So therefore Eliezer employed such matters. But we as Jewish people are not supposed to use it. That's Maimonides' opinion. However, Maimonides has a counterpart, a great scholar by the name of Rabbi Avraham ben David, the Ravid, who argues on Maimonides. And he opposes the idea of Maimonides to say, how can you come along and say this is a way of the non-Jews? If A, we find it in the Torah, we find it in the prophets, and B, we see clearly that the Talmudic scholars have employed such methods. Someone who explained that the difference between the prophets and what we find in the Torah is because those were prophets. Joshua was a prophet. Jonah was a prophet. So they didn't merely rely on the actual raffle, but they were also a prophet, and the way they employed their prophecy was through a raffle. But they really understood what was the right thing to do because of prophecy. Others explain that the difference is as follows. That when one is using a raffle to determine the future, that is not allowed. That is a attitude, and that is a non-Jewish way of looking, like going to a psychic to find out what's going to happen in the future, going to a stargazer to know what's going to happen in the future, or a fortune teller, and all those type of things. But what to do right now, that one's allowed to do. Why? Because the raffle is a tool to be able to create a vessel of a blessing to know what to do right now. So, for example, taking Eliezer. Eliezer, by employing the tactic of Rebecca giving him more water, that was a prayer, as he uses his own terminology. He was praying to God and created a tool of a vessel to be able to receive that blessing. Just on a side note, there was once a fellow who asked a blessing from the Rebbe for Parnasa, to make a living. So the Rebbe told him to buy a lotto ticket, because you got to make a vessel. You make a vessel, God will already give you what you need. Or the other guy that says he prays to God and says, God, I pray so hard that I should win the lotto. How come I never win the lotto? And a voice from heaven comes down and says, meet me halfway, buy a ticket. You got to make a vessel. So making the vessel was by employing one of these tactics. But what about an actual lottery? Can a person do such a thing? Can a person utilize this type of idea to be able to just pick out of a hat and say, should I go or shouldn't I go? Should I get into this business? Should I buy this house? Can he flip a coin? Is he allowed to do that? And there's many, and in this there's a divide amongst the scholars about the halachic codifiers, if one's allowed to do it. And we're not here to be able to say what the halach is, if you're allowed to or not. Then each person's going to ask his own rabbi what he's allowed to do. There are certain times that one's allowed to do it. And there are certain cases where one can employ this type of idea and use this method to be able to do it. The question more would be when it comes to not only financial matters, that's a little more lenient. The question would be more when it comes to life and death matters. Is a person allowed to decide to make a raffle and say, for example, the case of Jonah and Joshua, that was a life and death. Jonah saying, throw me into the water based on a raffle. And over there we must say because of prophecy. And the question becomes more complicated when it comes to life and death. Can a person make a raffle and say, okay, the boat is tipping, we need to throw a few people overboard, make a raffle, and the first people that come out, are you allowed to do that? And most halakhic authorities say that probably when it comes to life and death matters, one is not allowed to employ this type of lottery. And this is, as we spoke about in many other classes before, because when it comes to life, who are you to decide whose blood is less cheap or not? There was a story, I think, that happened. There was a boat that once left Liverpool, England, heading towards America, heading towards the United States, and it hit some type of storm or hit something at the time. And the captain over there was a captain by the name of Holmes. And there was only a certain amount of people that they were able to save with the lifeboats that were coming around. And he decided at the time that the people, who is he going to save and who is he not going to save? So he decided that all the single men that were not married and that were not part of the staff of saving people, those are the people we're going to throw overboard. We're not going to save those, and everybody else we're going to save. When he came to America, he was actually trialed by the fact that who is he to decide who should be thrown into the water. But the idea about, according to Jewish law, can I decide when it comes to life and death matters by a raffle is not so simple. This is a question which is debated in Jewish law just as recent in the 1700s and the 1800s when there was quotas that every community had to give soldiers to the Russian army, to the Polish army, whatever it may be, or in the Cantonists as well, when there were quotas that the question was, can we make a raffle and just pick the 5 kids out of the hat, and they should be the one when we knew it's a question of life and death. So these questions have come up again and again in Jewish law, and there's different opinions and variables into the situation. Sometimes they wanted to say, take the people who are anyways not doing anything for a living and let them go. But on the other hand, well, who are you to decide who's considered valuable or not? And the question becomes very complex, especially when it comes to life and death matters. But the question that we're back in our situation is, talking about a lottery is not something, as we can all come to an agreement is, it's not something that the human understands. It's something that we're asking of God to make that decision. It's something that God, so to speak, reveals and says, this is my opinion. In Hebrew, the word mikra It so happened to be, happenstance comes from the word rakma. Only from God do we know that it happens this way. So there's nothing by happenstance, there's nothing by chance. And therefore, when we talk about even flipping a coin, according to everybody, whether we see that there is some value in it, to the extent as we see that Shmuel did use a holy book and opened it up and to be able to find out what to do. Rabbi Yochanan did ask a scholar, did ask a child what to do based on it. So we do see that there are methods that God uses, a raffle or a lottery, to give his message and bring a message across. The famous Rabbi Leo of Vilna, known as the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, was known, it's called Goyer al Hagra, the lottery of the Gra, that he would use this method of opening up a sefer, opening up a book of Tanakh, of the Chumash, and he would use it to be able to determine certain things as well. There's a very famous story that there was, before the state of Israel was found, there was about 3 months actually before the state of Israel was found, there was a group of 35 students they were called Shayeret HaLamedhei, 35 students who were heading towards the settlements of Gush Etzion, and they were bringing arms that they should be able to fight against the British and the Arabs. And on the way, they met an Arab shepherd. And they had Rahmanas, they had mercy and had pity on this Arab shepherd. They weren't going to hurt him, and they let him go. This Arab shepherd went in turn and told the Arabs around them, and all came out to attack these 35 and killed these 35 students. From those 35 students, 24 of them they were able to identify. The others they weren't able to identify. Rabbi Yehuda Levin, Aryeh Levin, he was the rabbi of Jerusalem, a great rabbi at the time, wanted to bring all these people to burial, but he didn't know who they were. And instead, the story is told that he used Goyer HaGra, that he used this method by opening up a sefer, opened up a book, a chumash, and he would find it opened up to the place where it says Binyamin Omar, and then he said, oh, this guy is Binyamin so and so. And then he opened up another place and he found another proof in the pasuk, and it said so and on Ben Yamini, and said this is another person, and he was able to determine all the 12 bodies, identifying them by using this method of opening up a book and recognizing what to do. It's also told, and the Rebbe actually mentions it, Hasidim back in Russia, under communism, couldn't get in touch. It was dangerous for them to ask the previous Rebbe what to do. They couldn't get in touch with the previous Rebbe to ask him for advice. And we're talking about life and death matters as well. And what they would do is they would open up a Tanya, open up a Chumash, open up a Sefer, and from that they would get the Divine Providence where it would open up and they would have an answer, and that's what they would rely on, what to do. So the idea of using this type of method and employing a method of opening up a sefer, of a lottery, helping a person to give them direction what to do, was used. About telling about the future, about fortune telling and psychics and all that type of stargazing, that was not used. So we see clearly there's a difference between knowing what to do right now, where then you can't employ this type of area of raffles and lottery and opening up books and so on. However, to knowing the future, that is something which is opposed to Jewish law. Now that we understand the idea behind the raffle and what a lottery is all about, let's go back to our Torah reading, where the Torah tells us, A, that they have to split the land according to logic, and B, why they also needed to employ this concept of lottery to understand what the lottery is and which land they would get, even though they already had the responses from the Urim V'Tumim. And this is based on the idea of Hasidic interpretation, and the mystics explain, when we talk about lottery, that everything in this world works on two planes. There's a plane which is something which is logical, where we work on things which are based on reason, rationale, and knowledge. And then there are things that we do beyond logic. Goyro, lottery by definition, is something which is beyond logic. It's not something you can explain why this person won the raffle. There's no rationale of why you won a certain raffle or why the lottery came out that you should get A, B, and C. Everything a person does in this world, there are for two reasons. There's a logical reason that people do things, and then there's the true reason why people do things. What does this mean? That logic tells us why we do things because since it makes sense to us, it's comfortable, if we want to move here, it's there. We have logical reasons, but they're not necessarily the true reason for why it's done. Many times we can do things because it's more comfortable for me to do it. And that's why I'm pick and I'm opting to do that decision or that method. But very rarely is the logical decision necessarily the true decision and the right thing to do. The same idea is also when we talk about when God gives us and puts us in certain situations. There are certain things that God allows us to understand why I'm here, what I'm doing here, what my objective is. And then there are certain things that God does not give us the reason and rationale of why it's done. In the words of Kabbalah, the words that the Alter Rebbe brings in Likutei Torah, when God created the world, Nis'ava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God had a desire to make that this physical world should be a heavenly place. It doesn't say a logical reason. You can't explain. Why would God want the most lowly, materialistic, selfish place that there should be a heavenly abode? So therefore, what does the Alter Rebbe use the terminology? Nis'ava. It was a desire. It was a craving. You don't ask why you have a craving. A craving, by definition, is illogical. God's craving was that in the lowest place, there should be a heavenly abode. Many times as well, God puts us in places because that's what God craved. There is no logical reason that we understand. God, of course, has a reason. We can't understand it. When God split the land for the Jewish people, giving each Jew a parcel of land, He wasn't just giving each Jew a parcel of land at the time of the desert and telling the tribes of where they're going to have their land and the land of Israel. But what God was doing at the time, was telling every single one of us. When we come into the land of Israel, that means when we come to follow our objective where God places us. And God gives each one of us a mission in this world. He gives us the tools, He gives us the ability, and He gives us the place where we are. You should remember that this division, this decision, is not based on logic. Don't try to figure it out with your tools of logic. Don't try to say, this is, 1 second, I don't understand it, so therefore it can't be, it's for me. On the contrary. The more you think you have to understand it, the less you're going to understand about it. And the less you're going to be accomplishing your mission. What God was telling the Jewish people, that a Jew doesn't ask why, he asks what. Not why was I given this job, but what was I given this job for? How do I accomplish this job? The famous story that we say many times to be able to bring this out is a story that the Rebbe told. A story about the Alter Rebbe. It's a great story. I know we've said it once before, but it's a wonderful story. The great chassid of the Alter Rebbe, his name was Rabbi Yosef of Beshenkovich, an unbelievable scholar. He was offered all different opportunities to be rabbis at different places. And he once asked the Alter Rebbe, which position should he take to be a rabbi? And the Alter Rebbe looked at him and said, for the benefit of your soul, you should be a wagon driver. He didn't understand what that means. 10 years have passed. Finally, he got another position, which was a very prestigious position of the city called Lepla. They asked him to be the rabbi there. All of a sudden, he remembered that the Alter Rebbe told him that he is not supposed to be a rabbi, he has to be a wagon driver. He doesn't know what to do. He's going here and there. Finally, his wife told him, listen here, if the Alter Rebbe told you got to be a wagon driver, you're going to go be a wagon driver. She sold her jewelry. She got him a horse. He went to the wagon drivers and said, maybe you can teach me how to be a wagon driver. They looked at him and said, this old 70-year-old guy wants to be a wagon driver. Maybe he fell hard when he woke up this morning. But he says, no, I want to learn. And finally, he learned to be a wagon driver, and he became a wagon driver. And a year has passed since his life changed from becoming a great scholar to a wagon driver, oiling the wheels and feeding the horses. And one evening, he's sitting in a hotel, and there's a fellow that comes over to him, and the owner of the hotel tells him and says, listen here, there's a Jew. He's no longer religious. He works for one of the noblemen over here. He'll pay you well. He needs a wagon driver. Help him out. So he says, no problem, but one condition. I only leave in the morning after I finish davening. The fellow looks, what time are you going to finish davening? Morning is 6 o'clock. Okay, it's 7, 8 o'clock, he'll leave. No problem. So the fellow takes a room next to where Yosef, the wagon driver, is there, and he's going to sleep. All of a sudden, in the middle of the night, this fellow wakes up and he hears crying. Where's the crying coming from? He goes next door and he looks inside, he peeks inside and sees the wagon driver sitting on the floor, crying, doing tikkun chatzos, which is a prayer which is done at midnight, mourning over the destruction of the Holy Temple. He sees this, and all of a sudden, he recognizes and he realizes where he's from, and he turned the next morning, instead of asking Yosef to take him to his destination, he says, "Can you please teach me and help me return to where I was and to be able to repent to what I did wrong?" Yosef took him. At that time, the Alter Rebbe wasn't alive anymore. He brought him to the Mittler Rebbe, and he became a chassid of the Mittler Rebbe. With that, the Mittler Rebbe told him, "Your job has now been completed." What's going on over here? Can you explain the story by logic? Can you explain why a person who is of the greatest caliber to be a rabbi of what a great city, and he has to be the wagon driver? Why couldn't you take another person to be a wagon driver to meet this individual that he should be to do tshuva? It's because God doesn't run the world according to logic the way we understand it. The whole world, why God put certain things and what needs for our soul to be able to be uplifted and done the right thing, this is the way God decided. It's not something that we're going to understand. And the same way in the land of Israel. There were all different types of areas. There was the mountains, there were valleys, there were trees, there were properties that had beautiful landscapes, and there were properties that were able to achieve a lot of oil. There were all different kinds of properties in the land of Israel. So too, in our life, in Torah and mitzvahs, there's also different landscapes. There's also different areas. And every single person has their job, their mission, their land that they need to conquer. And Hasidism explains that this is what the Torah is telling us over here, how the Jewish people were splitting up the land of Israel, so too God gives every single one of us, according by divine intuition, not that we understand it, and it's not going to make sense. Don't even try to make sense of it. With this, we can also understand why on Yom Kippur the lottery had to happen between the two goats. Because in order for us to be able to achieve a level of forgiveness, logically, why should I forgive you? You did something wrong. Logically, as they say, you did the crime, pay the time. Pay the fine. Logically, where does forgiveness come into anything? What are we telling God? That we're beyond forgiveness. That Yom Kippur is a time of lottery, that God chose the Jewish people not because of who we are, not because we're the righteous and the greatest of all people, but because we have a relationship with God. A relationship that's beyond logic. And if it's beyond logic, that's why there's forgiveness. Who do you forgive? You forgive a person, an idea, a place, which is beyond logic. A person, your child, your friend, because it's not based on logic. Forgiveness is the antithetical to logic. Forgiveness means that I look beyond, and therefore I realize there's a greater mission here. And that's what we're asking God on the day of Yom Kippur, to go beyond logic, and therefore we use a lottery. Same thing is also Purim. Purim, what was Haman trying to do? Haman was trying to change the fact that the Jewish people are different. Because Haman told Achashverosh, look, the Jewish people are different than everybody else. They have their own laws. So he turns to God and says, I'm making the lottery. They're all the same. We can wipe them out. The Jews, non-Jews, what's the difference? What does God say? The opposite. The lottery tells me that I chose the Jewish people regardless of what they did wrong. Even though they went to the party of Achashverosh, even though they did something wrong, they are my people and I'm going to save them. Because the lottery means it's beyond logic. It's not because of the merits of what you did. It's because of who you are. We see this in the story of Esther. In the story of Esther, Esther is taken to Achashverosh. Achashverosh chooses her, and Esther has no idea. She's taken by force. She doesn't want to be there. Mordechai comes every single day to see what is being done with her, meaning she's there against her will. All of a sudden, the Jews are in trouble. Mordechai comes there and says, you know what? You're there. Who knows why you're there? Yes, you don't want to be there. You don't understand why you're there. But God decided you're there. That means you have a mission. Now it's up to you to figure that out. And what happens from that moment on? Esther owns her mission. What happens from that moment on? Who's the one shooting the ideas? Who's the one commanding? It's no longer Mordechai. Esther says, go tell Mordechai, go do this. Mordechai, go gather, follow. And what do we find in the Megillah continuously? Umamar Mordechai and Esther, and whatever Esther said, Esther before Mordechai. That's what the Jewish people kept. What got her to change? What made her recognize? What made her understand and recognize and say, I got to own the mission? Is the words that Mordechai told her. Mordechai told her two words. Umi yoidea. And who knows if this is why you were put there? What was Mordechai saying? What do you mean, who knows? If you don't know, I don't know. You're the prophet. You tell me what to do. What Mordechai was telling her was, mi idea, who knows? Who gives you the right to start saying, I don't know? I don't know why. I don't understand. You're not here to understand. We, the Jewish people, are in places because God chose us to be there by goyrel, by lottery. Lottery is beyond logic. You were chosen to be in the house of Achashverosh, to be picked in that place, not because it makes sense, because it's beyond rational. That means every person has a mission and a goal and a place where they are. And when we realize that our part of our life, the life we live, is a lottery that God chose us to be part of, that we become now agents of Almighty God to be able to fulfill the mission, we submit ourselves to a greater calling, we automatically have a certain serenity and a relaxation that comes to us. Because instead of fighting the mission, embrace the mission, utilize your talents to accomplish the mission. Every single person can point a finger and say, oh, if I would just be in another place, if I would just be in another situation, if I would be in a... No, that's not true. Because if you would be in another place in another mission, you wouldn't do it at anything. You would be zero. And the reason why you're here is because God knows your quality and He's waiting for you to step up to your potential, recognize your mission, do what you got to do. Not only that, sometimes where you find the greatest difficulties is because that is your mission and therefore all the obstacles are coming your way. Because it's so true that you need it. Look at Esther. And what does Esther say? For 30 days the king hasn't called me. I walk in now, I ruin myself spiritually, physically, who knows, everything my whole life. That's why she uses the terminology, the chasher avadati, what I lose, I will not only lose in this world, but I can lose in the world to come. It's not only a physical that I might be losing, it's also the spiritual. And therefore, what is Mordechai's reminder? Stop using logic. If God put you there, you have a job to accomplish, you know this is for you. The question is, are you utilizing your talents? Are you recognizing? Are you trying to rationalize it? Or are you going to go beyond rational? Look at it beyond rational, and that's the way you'll be able to accomplish it. So you may ask, but at what point do I say, okay, it's not for me? Maybe what point do I pick up my hands and say, you know what? I tried my best. God, something else. Maybe you got to find somebody else for the job. And the Talmud tells us there are three reasons why people might get divorced. Why a couple is allowed to get divorced. One person says, Rabbi Akiva says, if he finds a better person, says, you know what, this person I'm living with, it's not for me, I find somebody else. Beis Hillel says, only if she ruined his food, meaning she's out to get him, or there's a problem in the relationship, there's friction. And Beis Shammai says, only if there's something that they did something wrong. She wronged him, he wronged her, only then can they get divorced. The Rebbe explains that these three opinions are not talking about necessarily about a physical relationship of a husband and wife, but talk about our job that God gives us in this world. And there's three opinions when a person's allowed to dismiss themselves from the job that God has given them. Rabbi Akiva says, you know what? If I find a place that gives me more joy, why do I have to stay here? Let me move to someplace else if I get more happiness there. Beis Hillel says that's not enough of a reason to be able to leave your job. Because who says you're going to find more joy there? You think the grass is always greener on the other side, but who says? The only reason why you should be allowed to leave is if you see that you're not having success in what you're doing here, then you can go and move to another place. Beis Shammai is the most strict of all. The only time you're allowed to leave, maybe the success that you're not having is your own fault. Only if you've come and you've fell prey. That means you have stumbled. You have done the wrong job. You have actually corrupted the mission. Then you can leave, because then you realize that you did something wrong. And the Rebbe explains that, well, who's the halacha like? The halacha is like Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel is that if a person feels that he doesn't have success in what he's doing, and without this he doesn't have the impetus to be able to move forward. He doesn't have the ability to accomplish his mission. Just by saying, maybe I'll be happier somebody else, that's not an excuse. That's not a reason to leave. That is only a way, an alibi to be able to get out of what you're doing. Because you have to remember, as the Rebbe explains, that when a person gets divorced, the altar is crying. Meaning, when you leave your mission, God is saying, I put you here for a purpose. How do you just dismiss yourself from it? So therefore, you have to be the most stringent. And even if you feel you're not being successful, maybe you got to dig a little deeper. And you have to go according to Beis Shammai and go with the strictest opinion. And say, only, don't run to leave. Only if you feel that you've actually been negligent and you've done something wrong, only then you have the ability to dismiss yourself from it. What we see from all this is that the bottom line is that God has chosen us for a certain mission. God has put us in every single part of our life. It's not because it makes sense. And the struggles in life that we have and the challenges that come our way, we have to remember. It's beyond rationale. The very fact that God puts us in a certain place, in a certain time with the challenges that we have, number one is He's giving us the tools to be able to overcome it. How do we recognize? Step number one, how do I get over that hill? Is put yourself in God's arms. Hashlech Yehavchal Hashem. Realize that this is beyond rationale. Put your hands in the captain's. Recognize that God's the captain of the boat. He's the pilot of the plane. You just sit comfortably in your chair and go along for the ride. And you'll see success, you'll have peace, you'll have serenity. And when we finish our job, in our own little circle, and every single person in their own little mission that they have to accomplish in their private part of the world, then collectively that brings about the collective redemption that we all have in the world that brings Mashiach.